Okay.
Hello and welcome to The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a podcast about board games. I'm your host, Joe Sallin, and I'm joined tonight by...
Andrew Dennison.
Trent Ham.
Tonight's being used relatively loosely there. We're recording on a Saturday morning or on a Saturday afternoon. Anyway, boy, it feels like it's been a little bit of a period of time here since we've been able to get all together, and I'm really excited, guys, to hear what our new games that we've been playing is recently. And today we're going to be telling you guys about kind of a pessimistic topic: trigger phrases. So trigger phrases are the ones that set us off. When we hear somebody describe a game using this phrase, it kind of almost sounds to us like nails on a chalkboard. So we'll go through different ones that we specifically feel about, and we'll also offer some commentary as to why it is that we feel that way. Anyway, I'd like to take a moment here to thank our sponsor of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly, a very recent sponsor that I'm so pumped to have on board. The online game store Game Surplus has sponsored the Longview. It has sponsored Heavy Cardboard. It sponsors Low Player Count. These are my favorite content producers, and Game Surplus is at the heart of sponsoring all of them. And it is just so huge to me to be able to join into that. Game Surplus, an online game store where you're going to get the same sort of care that you'd expect from a friendly local game store. One thing that I'd say personally, having completed several orders with Game Surplus, is that you're going to get a specific attention to detail. But what is really missing from my local game store, and I really like my local game store guys, but they just in general, they're being supported by Magic. Magic players, Magic card sales, Magic tournaments, and board games, if there's space for tables, we're fine. But in general, when I go and ask them about the most recent board games, they have a search or two, but if it's not from their distributors, there's no way I can get that game. Game Surplus has a very wide net that they cast. They'll cast a net that goes all the way to European distributors and European game stores, where they're going to be able to find you games and versions and editions of games that are going to be specifically what you ask for. Carmen's just a really great guy. Check out Game Surplus at gamesurplus.com. We're going to go ahead and kick off reviews here with first a gateway game that made a lot of buzz at last year's Gen Con. Trent, take it away.
I'm going to talk about New York 1901, which is a game that I actually received as a Father's Day gift for my 3 kids. My youngest one is 7, and my oldest is 11. And as a family, we're collectively starting to play a lot of light Euros. I would say that my oldest has kind of graduated beyond that and is pretty adept at medium weight Euros like Castles of Burgundy. Sure. My youngest has kind of taken the first steps into playing Euros at all. So we kind of felt like this might be a good family game as being a pretty light Euro, and that's definitely what it is. New York 1901 is a game for 2 to 4 players. It takes maybe 45 minutes. In it, all you're really doing is there's this kind of abstracted map of early 1901 New York, in essence. It's basically of a small chunk of Manhattan. There are a few streets running each way on it, and then the blocks are made up of little squares. There's probably 12 to 18 squares per block because the blocks are a little bit different size. So there's these streets. They have little rectangles, and within those rectangles, there's a bunch of little squares. You get the idea. It looks like a kind of a tic-tac-toe board.
Yeah.
So all you're doing on your turn really is on your turn, you can claim one of those rectangles or one of those, a little portion of one of those blocks, or you can demolish a building you've already built to put a new building in its place. So when you claim a spot, you can either just leave a worker there and put a new building on that spot that you claimed, or your other option on the turn obviously is demolish buildings and put down a new one. Each of the building tiles that you have, everybody has an identical set. They look like Tetris pieces. They have varying point values based on how big and how awkward shaped the Tetris pieces are. And there's different levels of them. There's bronze, silver, and gold. You can demolish bronze buildings to put up silver buildings. You can demolish silver buildings to put up gold buildings, or you can jump straight from bronze to gold, or whatever you want to do like that. You just can't replace the same type of building over the same type again. You can't put a lower building on top of a higher level one, because their skyscrapers are getting better and more modern. Mm-hmm. This game is really simple to teach in its basic form. I would happily teach this to pretty much any 7-year-old I've ever met. If you take out all of the optional bits, I will say that even with the basic game, you can play it really cutthroat. This is a game that can be horribly cutthroat if you're playing it with observant people. I mean, brutally cutthroat if you want it to be. Now, it comes with 4 little expansion modules that when you add all of them, definitely adds some more complexity onto the game. I find, obviously, it's better if you just throw all of them in, and so does my 11-year-old, but my 7-year-old, it would be overwhelming for him. It's really not, I mean, even with all the stuff on there, I would describe it as a light to medium weight. I would say it actually gets meaner if you add on all the stuff. So if you're looking for a lightweight Euro, maybe medium weight, to play with your family, or possibly if that's your wheelhouse to play with friends, and you really like cutthroat play where you just like, someone's been planning for 3 turns to do something, and then you just place a worker and stop everything they're doing, and they can't do anything about it, and their whole plan is just shot to dust. You'd like 1901. If that sounds miserable to you, you wouldn't like 1901. That's really what it comes down to. It's a light, very cutthroat Euro. That's what it is. It looks pretty, nice components, presented very well, easy to teach, but it can be very cutthroat.
Does the cutthroat nature undermine the addition of the modules and stuff? Is it, or would you say that they still integrate nicely and they still offer some new choices and some heft that's deserved?
The modules integrate nicely. They integrate new choices. Some of the new choices are very cutthroat.
Okay, so it just kind of keeps up that same
Yeah,
sort of.
there's no way you can set it up so that it's not cutthroat if people want it to be. Now, when I've been playing with my kids, I have intentionally not been being cutthroat, except with my wife. My wife and I are cutthroat to each other.
Oh, this is hilarious. Yeah, if you play with Trent and his wife, it is just a blast to see. Like, once we played, what was it, the Tomb one, the one where you're entombing, Valley of the Kings? And it was like there'd be a card that says attack a player, and it was just automatic. As soon as Trent's wife had a card that says that, it's just, here you go, Trent. It's back and forth.
That's what happens often in games. We have played a Game of Thrones, the board game, together, and it's been comical. Anyway.
Yeah, basically diplomacy, a game of diplomacy.
Yeah,
all right.
Much.
I'm actually quite interested in your description of New York 1901. It was one that I kind of passed up, hearing that it was quite gateway, but you know what? Like, that cutthroat, tight Euro is a little bit interesting to me.
Yep, the graphic design is obviously reminiscent of Ticket to Ride, and a little bit of the gameplay is because there's like a row of cards that the only purpose they serve is to say what color of block you can put your little worker on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not. You don't do any set collecting with it. It just like kind of restricts your choices. So without that little bit of restriction of your choices, this game would be just like a Mad Max wasteland of destroying other players' hopes,
hurting people.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's in there solely to modulate the screwing other people. I really do.
Wow,
it tones it down a little bit.
Just to moderate, yeah. Wow. Yeah. Well, that sounds pretty cool. And I got a buddy actually who lives in New York now, and believe it or not, transitioning here into my review, I got a chance to see him for the first time in like 4 years last night. I'm down in the luxurious, the beautiful Fort Madison, Iowa, which is actually really close to where Trent lives, down in the southeastern corner of Iowa on the Missouri Illinois border. And anyway, my buddies moved to New York, so I could see New York 1901 being a great next game to get for him, because last night I gave him King of New York, which it kind of might give you an idea of what level of games. Really good friend of mine, but he has not taken, the modern board gaming, like, he has not caught the bug that I've caught, but he's definitely has that potential. When I'm showing him games like I did last night, we played No Thanks, which is a game that I'm going to tell you guys about that's super simple. And it's actually been taking our group of heavy gamers, especially the elusive Nate, by storm. In No Thanks, it's all it is 55 little plastic chips in a card deck that's 33 cards, numbered 3 through 35. On your turn, you either you start up the game with an equal amount of chips. On your turn, you either put a chip on top of a card that's been flipped off the top of the deck, or you take that card with all chips on it. So you are eventually going to have to take a card. There's no way in this game, if players are playing optimally, or at least some degree of optimally, that you're ever going to end up without cards in this game, because you're going to have to take a card at some point. The higher the card is, the more points it's worth. And guess what? This is game like golf. So in this game, the lower points wins. And every chip that you have at the end of the game counts as a negative point. It's a really interesting decision to see how many chips will accrue on these high-numbered cards before somebody picks them up. Here's the one big thing that changes how the game plays out, though. You're going to take 9 cards out of this deck because every time that people get a card, if you take a card and it creates a straight for you, where you've got like 4, 5, 6, or 32, 33, 34, you are going to be able to cancel out the values of anything besides the lowest card. So this really allows for some fun. Like if I end up where I've got a 32 and the 33 gets flipped up, I know that card is free for me to take. I'm going to end up probably taking that card because that card is worth tons of points to everybody else. But I can sit there and let it get a bunch of chips on it before I finally take it. The fun decisions in this game come from whether or not you're going to take a card with lots of chips on it that might hurt another player. And so simple decisions. Game takes like 10 minutes. But every time that it's my turn, I feel like I'm playing almost a little bit of an economy game. I'm playing a push your luck, whether or not the card that I need to create a straight is going to be in this game. You're taking out about roughly between a third and a fourth of the cards. So, if I take a 32 and the 34 comes up, I could take it, but there might not be a 33. I might just be stuck with 66 points at the end of the game. And the winning scores in this game are usually like below 20. So, you're not going to be doing that. It gives you some really interesting decisions to make, and it's so easy to set up. Your time investment here is almost nothing. And as a result, any bit of choice just feels like this really welcome breath of fresh air, and it's what makes it really a perfect filler. So I'm going to jump on board here with all the other, with kind of the chorus of online reviewers that I've heard saying No Thanks is a really great filler game, because I've never seen a game so easy to teach that gives you such a decision to make in this micro amount of time. No Thanks, totally pick this one up. You should have this just to fill in any gaps. It's like a little mortar that fills in the bigger bricks of your game night. Andy, I even think that No Thanks could be potentially interesting for you, dude. I really do think so. Like, after seeing how Nate from our group, who's usually, he's one of our biggest 18xx players, it could be extremely, it can be extremely interesting, even if you're interested in like those more economic games.
Yeah, I've looked at No Thanks. I haven't actually got a chance to play it. But it looked like one of those kind of lighter games you could play with, family members and stuff who, putting Vinos in front of them is probably not a good plan.
Potentially, yes. This can bridge the gap, though. But I understand, Andy, that you're scared of like bridging the gap and then being sucked into the other side of the bridge where you're stuck now playing like party games. Yay.
No, I'm still not going to play party games.
No Thanks is a perfectly good filler.
Yeah.
That's basically the way I feel about it.
Mm-hmm.
If we're filling 15 minutes between games, I'll happily play No Thanks.
Yeah.
I've never seen anybody like, oh, no, I don't want to play No Thanks. The only reason you would not play No Thanks is if you were going to play something that was just bigger and better. I just don't imagine people being like, oh, I hate No Thanks. Like, it really is fun when you can take a card that leaves somebody with almost no chips. It is just really, really fun to do that. So anyway, that's No Thanks. And now for our main course, because we started with a little bit of an appetizer, I've given you the segue into our main course, which Andy's going to tell us about a Martin Wallace design that has somehow held up over 14 years.
Yeah, so I got the chance to play Princes of the Renaissance recently. This is, once again, a Martin Wallace design. It is basically Auctions, the board game. Set in Renaissance Europe, but the game starts out with an auction. You're auctioning for turn order. Then you use some of the money from that to auction for which family you're going to possess, which is going to give you certain special abilities. Then you basically start putting up tiles for auctions, which might generate more resources to do the auctions with. And then you can cause battles, because what happens is you get these tokens that are basically like shares of stock or whatever. And you can have battles between the different colors on this map of Italy. And it's a way for you to get money and also a way to boost the colors you represent and to negate the ones that are coming up ahead you don't want other players to win. So you bid for whether you're going to be the attacker. You can bid to be the defender because that, even if you're hurting yourself stock-wise, you get more money. So there's benefits to doing that. But every decision's pretty interesting because you're either buying troops for your army, and these are kind of a one-shot thing in the sense that you either get them or you don't. You can't pick them up later if somebody's bought them all out. But other than that, it's just most points wins in the game, wins in the end. It kind of has those lovely Martin Wallace heavier game standbys where you can, lose your butt on economic stuff. Like I said, the colors represent shares. So there's kind of an economic game underpinnings to the theme of this one. And it's just really, really good. And so if you haven't had a chance to do this one, I would give it a shot. It plays a little bit longer, but not too bad. I think you can still maybe pick up ones from Mercury Games. And but anyway, that's Princes of the Renaissance. It's Auctions, the board game. So if you like auctions, you're going to like the Princes of the Renaissance probably. If you don't like auctions, you're probably not going to like Princes of the Renaissance all that much. But yeah, things are really tight. Money's tight. You really have to be careful that you don't overpay or you can put yourself in a pretty bad position. So that's Princes of the Renaissance. I would happily play this again. But like I said, I like auctions. So,
Trent, have you played Prince of the Renaissance?
Yes, I played it with you.
I know. Yeah, that was me asking you for your comments. Oh, and I did want to say really quick, Tattered Board, TC from Tattered Board's out there on our live chat, and he wants you to know, Andy, how you would rate Princes of the Renaissance compared to other Martin Wallace games.
Compared to other Martin Wallace games, my favorite is hands down Age of Steam. There's no question about that. I haven't played a lot of his designs to any huge amount. I guess out of the ones I've played that I know are definitely Martin Wallace are Age of Steam, Steam, and
was there another one about trains? What was the?
Oh, Via Nebula, which is basically trains. And anyway, Princes of the Renaissance and Brass. I guess based on the times I have played this, I would probably put it. I would rather play it than say Steam, and I would put it about the level of Brass for me. So Age of Steam first, very, very first. I'd probably put Brass and Princes of the Renaissance in the same category. I'd happily play either one.
Cool. Thank you. All right, Trent, back to you. Sorry about that interruption. And thank you for that question, TC.
I liked it. It's a great auction game. I feel like it's hard to it's one of those games where everything is very dynamic because it depends so much on what other players are doing. I mean, as any good auction game is, but I think I liked it on paper more than I liked playing it. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense. I think theoretically I liked it better than the time that I played it. I think it's because it was hard for me to assess the variable player powers. Like, I mean, because it feels like you're often just auctioning player powers and stocks. That's mostly what you're auctioning off.
Yeah, well, I mean, they're kind of like melded together. They're stocks that function as variable player powers. Yeah. Yeah.
It was hard for me to assess the first time through how good the various variable player powers were. Unless it ended up feeling a lot like my first play of Age of Steam, which I walked away from with a negative feeling from that too. And that you can just back yourself into a corner that you can't get out of. I felt like the Princes of the Renaissance is the same deal as Age of Steam like that. That it rewards a lot of plays because you can mess up really badly and put yourself in a position where you can't do anything. And you can't be competitive.
Yeah, oh, totally. Like, what happened in our game was, in my first game of this, because it's so, like Trent said, dynamic and dependent on what players do. My first game of this, all the players but one basically emptied out all of their resource, everything. And then this one player who was left with resources was able to get like 3 or 4 easy, cheap auctions for incredibly powerful abilities that resulted in him scoring like 20, 30 points more than the next highest player, almost doubling their score. So you really have to, I mean, there are ways to score points in this game, but almost everything seems to have an equal and opposite reaction possible depending on what the players do. So do you choose variable player powers based on just their abilities? Do you choose variable player powers, the stocks that have these variable player powers based on what city they come from? Do you try to intentionally diversify your stock profile so that way you are only so much impacted? Or do you really try to go hard into one specific thing? Do you build up a huge army? And the one thing I do think is almost always good to do in this game is taking lots of army tiles. I feel like without those army tiles, you end up really severely underpowered and at the mercy of other players towards the end of the game. And there's a limited amount of these of army tiles you can purchase, and they do not change based on player count. And you can only have one of each, which means that in like a 3-player game, basically everybody can get everything. Whereas in a 4, 5, and I think it even goes up to 6, a 4, 5, 6-player game, you're really going to be, like the first 2 or 3 rounds should essentially, in my mind, be a draft of just all these military tiles. And then once that's kind of established, then you know who has power in what in either defender or attacker capabilities. And you start really feeling more like the sort of war beneficiaries and warlords that are making money from, the war profiteers, I guess, as you play this. But you're also making money based on where your stocks are at. To me, I can't believe that this game came out in 2003. And I think, Trent, in a lot of ways, this echoes kind of what you were saying. That's like, it seems so interesting and so cool on paper. But when you're first playing it, you know that this game is going to be very dictated by the players. Any new player, or especially if you have a majority of new players, like a plurality of new players, then you are really going to be dealing with an interesting beast that just is not going to feel like, of the games I've played, nothing feels even remotely similar. So I would personally say Prince of the Renaissance gets a really, really high, at this point, high mark for me, because I can't believe that this was the type of game that was being put out in 2003, 14 years ago, like a stock together with a variable player power. I think that sometimes, the stocks and variable player powers are not super powerful, but just, I mean, the way that you end up with your hands in so many pots and the way that makes you make decisions is really, really cool. And just to quickly address where it would fit along with my favorite Martin Wallace games, having played most of what Martin Wallace has, I've not played Onward to Venus or Aeroplanes or I've played yeah, I haven't played that. I haven't played most of them, I should say, but I've played about probably half dozen to 10 different ones. And like I've played London, I've played Steam, Age of Steam, Study in Emerald, Few Acres of Snow, Automobiles. And I would say that for me, it does feel like it's the oldest because it just kind of is. And it feels like it has some rough edges here and there. But the players are so in control that I think that's totally acceptable, and I appreciate it for that. So for that reason, I would consider it to be, for me, not quite as good as, say, like A Few Acres of Snow, which just to me is just an absolute masterpiece and just such a unique combination. But I would say that it's one that I could play more as, like, it almost feels like Martin Wallace's version of a negotiation game. And for that, it really fulfills just a separate sort of pedestal that makes it difficult to compare to, say, like Age of Steam and other games that have you a lot more focused on efficiency. And here in Princes of the Renaissance, efficiency is really only there if other players allow you to have it. I don't know if that gives an idea, but it's really tough to compare to any of his other games because of how different it feels, because of how player-controlled it is. So that's Princes of the Renaissance, which has, like, what I would consider to be, I don't want to say trigger phrases for me, but like when I hear this phrase, specifically variable player powers combined with stocks in companies, or, in cities, and then players have control over what cities fight what other city, and the outcomes of those battles based on their own private military mercenary force. That to me makes me really, really, really excited. And I'm like, holy crap, this just sounds so cool. I can't believe that this is actually a game. Like if that were to come out 2017, 14 years later, I would be like all about this game. I can just hear myself in the hype section being like, this sounds so cool. But that's not always the case. Sometimes you hear a combination of things that people use to try to get you excited in a game, and they intend them to be positive praise, but ultimately you kind of read between the lines and you're left with feeling like, yeah, this probably isn't for me. And we're going to call those trigger phrases. And trigger phrases specifically were one of your, you had the idea, Andy, to talk about trigger phrases. You wanted to kind of make this our topic. And I want you to kind of go into depth about why that is that you wanted to make this our topic.
Yeah, so I guess the reason it became a topic was it was a question I posted on the Heavy Cardboard Guild as well as our own guild. And what I was curious about is I'm just fascinated, like, because I'm a science dork and teacher, like how people's brains work. So sometimes they'll throw out these questions that are leading just to kind of see like what people will take from it and how they'll respond to it. And I was thinking that there are certain phrases I hear that can either kind of turn me on to a game or turn me off to a game. And what I was wondering is, do other people have those same feelings? Are there things that they hear that just turn them off? And what are those things? And what I found out through this is there's quite a lot of diversity in gamers of what they hear and don't, and how that's going to affect things. So it was really posed as a question in the sense of, I just want to see what people think. Like, how does their brain work when they hear these things? Because I don't know. I'm assuming not everyone thinks the same way I do. Probably most of the human race, quite frankly.
No, the sane ones of us don't.
Yeah, you shouldn't. Really. So anyway, I'm just curious, like I said, and I brought it up as a topic just to see how, different people within our own podcast view these things, because compared to a lot of podcasts out there, we do have a pretty wide range on our podcast of what the different, contributors don't like, and that kind of thing. So that was really kind of why I wanted it as a topic, more to just discuss it and see what terminology is being used by people out there, either reviewers or companies. And what does that mean to you? I guess that's where I was coming from it.
Absolutely, dude. I think that's a really good, that's a good intro into what it is, when I don't know, I feel like there's a lot of buzzwords, right? And me and Andy are both teachers. Trent, your wife's a teacher. You're steeped in education. There's a lot of buzz phrases, and so a lot of things get thrown around. And when teachers hear phrases like the Common Core or standards-based assessment, it can be this same sort of a trigger phrase. And
triggered me when you said no, not standards.
Yeah, Andy's already triggered. So I think that this can cross over into games as well. And I think well, let's just get started talking about some of the phrases here. All right. And I think we just had Adam here joined us on the chat and mentioned how when we reviewed games today, we had like a gateway game, a super fast filler, and then Princes of the Renaissance, which is actually probably a pretty light game for Andy. So we had
Princes of the Renaissance.
Oh yeah, that was a light game for you, right? It was only about what, 2-3 hours?
2-3 hours, not that complicated. It's a gateway game.
Thanks for joining us, Adam. All right, so and anyway, yeah, anybody who's participating here in the chat, if you put down a trigger phrase, I'll probably throw it out there, and I don't know if it looks like Andy's also following it, but then we'll react to it and see what we all have to say. So I got a few of them that I collected over the years here, the years being since I knew this was going to be our topic a few weeks ago. Anyway, one of the first trigger phrases I hear and feel like, oh boy, is like when it says on the box that it features a certain amount, usually between 50 and 200 plastic miniatures. And that just to me is like you're really marketing this game based on the physical the physical presence of the game, which I know is really interesting for a lot of individuals. I understand that's a selling point, but when I see that, I think there's only so much time and resources every game company has, and when you're making it come with this huge amount of unique sculpts, then that invariably is money that you're paying for salaries that don't exactly involve necessarily the gameplay. And there's, of course, exceptions to that in every case. But what do you guys think? What do you think, Trent?
I agree with you, but I think a lot of times the phrases that turn us off from games are marketing speak.
Okay,
I find that the copy editing that goes on in the back of a board game box almost always turns me off of a game rather than on.
Oh gosh, yeah. Because they're trying to sell it. I don't think we're the market for those, probably, and that's probably the case.
I don't think we're the market for anyone who reads the back of a board game box.
Probably not. Yeah, we're going to be reading like the description on Board Game Geek. We're going to be reading, any sort of logs, designer diaries, in-depth things like that. So yeah, I agree with that.
Good thing that most of my favorite games are completely white on the back.
Oh yeah.
Splatter and all aboard. The back of their boxes are solid white.
Yep. That's what you get. Yeah, I would agree. I think, and this is particularly too, not just miniatures, but in general, like I think Kickstarter games tend to be the most flagrant offenders. I don't know. Offenders isn't really the right word here, but the idea of you should buy my game because there's so much in the box. Oh my God, look how big this box is and all the stuff that's in it. I think that seems to be a common selling tactic, particularly with the Kickstarter games. Tend to be the ones where this kind of happens. And I would say, for me, that phrase does give me pause. It doesn't necessarily mean I won't buy the game, but I have to think about it and be like, are you just putting a lot in here to appease the Kickstarter crowd? B, does any of this extra crap actually affect the gameplay of the game in a meaningful way? And that kind of thing. So I guess I would prefer more simplistic components with high depth of gameplay under over a giant box of stuff. What I review on a regular basis definitely pans out in the kind of games I talk about. But yeah, I would say that, yeah, if they say it has miniatures or something like that, that's kind of a thing that I pause on or it turns me off on, just because it's such a selling point for Kickstarter, for one, which I'm kind of just like, really? And it just really makes me question where the depth of the gameplay is, just because so many miniature games I have played, it's like, yay, these are wonderful miniatures, and the game's kind of boring as hell.
Well, so here's the question, though. Because this is almost as shallow of a compliment or a marketing phrase, as Trent was saying, but it makes me feel quite differently. And that would be like, what if it said something like includes 52 unique illustrations by, and then it named the artist?
That doesn't necessarily tell me much one way or another. I will say that a game that focuses on art probably won't appeal to me.
Okay. Andy?
Yeah, dude, I play 18xx games. Obviously, art's not a big deal.
Yes, clear. Okay, I got you. All right, so kind of the same idea. I get what you're saying.
I don't think that's for me. The art component is not really a turn on or a turn off. It's just, yeah, if it's there, it's there. As long as the art doesn't impede gameplay. So I think rather than a particular artist, what might affect my opinion more is a particular company. Because they have a lot more to do with, say, the layout of a board and stuff. So, for example, the last game I've played where the board was kind of hard to parse out that I could remember was Tricerion. It was a beautiful board, but sometimes figuring out where the places you need to be and what you needed to do was hard. Like, the board, looking at it, was not intuitive, but it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I fall on it. So art is kind of a neither here nor there.
Yeah, totally, man. Like, I'm thinking that and I should just put this in the chat, that like when they did put plastic train miniatures in Age of Steam, that's been like an area of contention where a lot of people have just replaced them with discs. So, and that's, I mean, just because they fit a little bit better. So yeah,
well,
it is.
That's another example of where I think, though, the art does impede the gameplay. Like the plastic trains are all nice looking on their own, but they tend to fall over, they clog up the board, and things are a little bit harder to see, at least for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's when an art can kind of get in the way, actually, when they try to make something pretty as opposed to just making it functional. And I think that Adam here in our chat has really brought up a good point, that in 18xx, players are already bought in. So anything that would be added to that artistically has always been viewed negatively. I would say, though, maybe with the one exception of 1846, but even 1846 isn't really so much art as it just did good component quality for the same sort of 18xx designs you'd be looking for. It's to get you excited about the game, to draw you in if you know nothing about it, and we usually just aren't really the audience for that. So anyway, yeah, definitely the art topic, I think, is something that if a game tries to sell itself on that, it's definitely losing at least people that are it's losing me, and I think to a certain extent as well the other guys here, right?
Maybe. Like I said, if I see like unbelievable, beautiful artwork in minis, I guess my knee-jerk reaction sometimes is, what are they trying to cover up?
All right, moving on. The skeletons in the closet, you have to figure that out on your own. Another specific sentence that gets me is when a game advertises an extremely wide player count. Like specifically 1 or 2 through 8 players. And that just, like when you're saying, oh, everybody can play, is like saying we've got components for everybody to play. But if you want to hate the game, you should probably play with this many or less.
Yeah, like 7-player Caverna.
Oh, I've heard of that taking 4.5 hours once. They started a game at like 11:30 at night at a game night, and people were not getting home until 3.
If I had to play 4.5 hours of Caverna, I think 4.5, I would murder somebody at that point.
Oh man, yeah, it'd be rough, real rough. And it was a teaching game. So anyway,
we could have been sitting here playing 1889 for that time, man.
Yeah, probably. You probably could have got it done quite a bit faster too. Yeah. What do you think, Trent?
I don't really have too much to say here.
All right. You think 8 players can be just as fun as 2 players?
All right. You guys, I lost your audio for about 30 seconds, so I wasn't actually sure what you were talking about.
Okay, no, I was talking about player count listed on the box. Like if a game says it plays like 2 through 8 players.
Yeah, if it has a very, very low player count and then follows it with a high number, I don't trust it.
Yeah. Oh, man. Quickly. It's not going to be consistent throughout that. And I think really like that a lot of times that's the publisher that's trying to force the designer to, to play to really higher amounts. And to kind of piggyback off of that, probably the most, to me, the worst thing that I can see, if I'm going to go pick up an expansion box, I just absolutely despise when it says on it, like, includes components for a 5th player, because almost invariably that's a bad idea. Like, if a game is capped at 4, it's for a reason, And then some games shouldn't even be capped at 4. Some games should be capped at 3, like Mage Knight or Star Wars Frontiers. Absolutely. So, yeah, there's no reason that you should ever play that game with 4. It just turns into this all-day game.
Well, you can do Mage Knight at 5 now.
Andy, I don't have video because I'm recording off of a laptop that doesn't have it. But I just want you to know that every facial muscle in my face went totally lax when you said that.
Yep, it's no, I would never, ever do that. The downtime would be insane. But yeah, it's wide player count's a bit iffy. I kind of always have an issue with I think for me, the other issue is oftentimes if there's that wide of a player count, it's on not as complex games usually. So for the kind of games I play for the most part these days, you don't see that wide of a player count. You might see on some 18xx games like a 3-7, like 1822, I think might do that, or
1830
something.
does it.
Yeah.
1830, does it go up to 6 or 7?
Goes up to 7.
Yeah,
Okay.
it goes up to 7, but the thing about those is it kind of fundamentally changes the game. So like in 1830, if you played it with 7, I hear that game pretty well always ends on a bankruptcy.
Well, yeah, because the difference, and I think this is something that might depend on your preference in the 18xx genre, but when you get up to 6, which my very first game of 18xx was either 6 or 7 players. I think it might have been 6, but it could have been 7. I don't remember exactly, but at that level, you've given so little money at the beginning of the game that to be able to get a company off the ground and running, you have to invest in others' companies. Like, it forces a semi-cooperative start to the game. And a lot of times that's why the bankruptcies result, because when you are that dependent on other players, usually 18xx games offer you the ability to really undercut and take the legs out, just totally tank another game company or another player's company. However, that's really like up to people's preferences. We got, like, Adam here says he loves it with 5 to 6. So, 6 it could be the sweet spot. I think 5 might be the transitional with 18xx because sometimes, depending on the game, if 5 is its max, that might end up in some semi-cooperative situations. But I think once you get up to 6, it's pretty much always the case. What do you guys think?
I would say probably. I think it depends on the one. Like 1822, I think we played it with 5 or 6 at HeavyCon, and there wasn't a lot of cooperation there, but that game's kind of designed so that you don't have to. But yeah, for a lot of them, there's going to be that in there. And I don't know, that doesn't bother me so much in 18xx. I think it's just because if I play in 18xx, I'm already anticipating spending a lot of time playing it. So that longer time adding of players doesn't mean much to me. But yeah, I mean, like Caverna, someone's like, oh, it plays up to 7. If I see like a Euro game that says it plays up to 7, I'm pretty okay, what's going on here? Because that doesn't, I don't know, just the best Euro games I played do not play 6 and 7.
I just agree with you, but I would say that I probably would just apply that to just about every game. There's very few games where when you get, usually the loss is not always the same, depends on the game, but once you get up to like those 6-player count and up, you end up either sacrificing the ability for all players to interact with each other, or you end up taking the entire game and dragging it out amazingly long, and nobody likes that. I think we can all kind of agree. So you end up losing something at those higher player counts, but there's a few situations in which I think it actually can kind of work, but they're very rare, and they're ones that even you do end up still losing something. Yeah, and I would agree that what Adam here says, that there's not that much time because it's same company, same like banks and stuff. I think you just kind of end up spending more time idle because, you have to wait for other players to take their operating rounds with their companies and stuff. So, and I think that's just, how much time you're okay with spending waiting and watching what other players are doing.
I tend to think that almost every game out there, and there are very, very few exceptions to this, have 1 or 2 optimal player counts and everything else is suboptimal.
I think I would agree with that. Absolutely. All right. Let's go ahead, guys, and talk about a different, what's a phrase, and I know, Andy, there's kind of one that is just, I think you have one phrase that sort of inspired this entire discussion, and I'm waiting for you to drop it at any point here.
Go for it, Andy.
Yeah, for me, especially on the heavy end of the hobby, I don't know, when I hear the word streamlined at this point, that immediately I'm like, because whatever, I don't know, the games that say people say are so streamlined, that means to me, I guess, that they've really rounded off the rough edges and it's not going to be too offensive or hard for anyone, which to me just has the game's lacking in character at that point. And so, for example, a game that I would call highly streamlined is Scythe. And I bought that expecting to love it, and it was just, there was no character to the game. And it was, I mean, nobody's going to be really offended by it, but nobody's going to really love it either as much. And so when I hear that phrase, that this is streamlined, that anyone can play this game, those kind of things immediately kind of give me a pause. So many of the games I really enjoy do have rough edges. Phil Eklund games, they always have rough edges. That's why so many of them have living rules and stuff like that. But yeah, I guess that's just a phrase that'll always give me pause, because to me, you can kind of, I don't know, over streamline a game. The more you try to appeal to the masses with it, the less interesting side situations come up in it. That's kind of where I feel about that term, I guess. I know for some people, and actually when it was early in the hobby, it was kind of a good term for me. It was like, oh, this game will be cool, it'll be playable. But now that I've kind of moved more into this heavy, eclectic end of the hobby, it's just, I don't know, that phrase tends to mean that the game will be fine, but it's not going to be horrible, and it's not going to be great either. I guess an example of a designer I would say doesn't go with streamlined is Vlada Chvátil. All of his games have some weird, quirky situations, rough edges, unique things going on. He was in an interview once, and he said that basically he wanted people to either love his games or hate his games. He didn't want everyone to just be like, yeah, it's okay, because that means you haven't done anything really unique or awesome. And to me, that's kind of what Scythe is. It's like, yeah, it's a good game. I would play it. Mm-hmm. But it's not outstanding, and it's not horrible. It's just kind of there.
Yeah, I personally think that there's an interesting, what do you think between this as a redefinition of the word streamline? Like, instead of saying streamlined, it's refined.
I'd say homogenized.
Yes, that's even, yeah. When something just feels like they've taken all the flavor out of it. I think that this is something that gets especially brought up between first and second editions of Martin Wallace games. And so I'm going to drop one here on TC because I know that he loves Age of Industry, but a lot of people view Age of Industry as a streamlined version of Brass. And there's other like sort of positives that I think like Age of Industry has the much more expandable properties and different maps, and tends to just work better at different player not necessarily different. Well, yeah, could be different player counts, but it works well to apply it to different industrial revolutions and buildups around the world. Whereas Brass has this mid-game reset that makes it incredibly difficult for new players on their first turn. They're like, oh my gosh, all my stuff's going away. Whereas when you're an experienced player, you're like, that's what you're entirely anticipating. So it's, Brass is your sort of like has those little aspects to it. But Age of Industry is very frequently called a streamlined version. This is the same sort of thing that happened with the A Study in Emerald first and second edition. Like the second edition of A Study in Emerald, I've only played the second edition, but when I hear people talk about the first edition, that it had some frustrating hiccups to it, where people would be in a situation where they literally could not win the game because they just did not know. They did not know how it was. They knew somebody was on their team with a really low score, and that person was going to prevent them from winning the game by themselves. Whereas they streamlined that, I suppose, or they took away a little bit of the rough edge of that by making it a penalty in the second edition, but not the only thing that matters. So, I mean, that, and then there's a few other aspects of the game where I feel like the streamlining process hurts the game a little bit. And what I can see, like, there's location cards that you could fight over in the first game, whereas once you get the card, you just have the card in the second edition. So there's a few other aspects, but like, man, sometimes when the quote unquote streamlining comes up, it comes with enough benefits that we're even willing to take both games and just appreciate them separately, right, Trent?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like Brass and Age of Industry?
Yeah, I like them both. I can't really choose between. I don't think Age of Industry is a streamlined brass, though. I don't think that's entirely an accurate description. I like both of those games. I wouldn't really choose between them. I actually, I think Brass Birmingham is a streamlined version of Brass.
Oh
yeah, I haven't
boy,
played
that
that
makes
one
me
yet.
feel a little bit less excited about it coming in here. I read about it, but like, yeah, because I agree. Like when I have a game that I like, if I'm a real big fan of that game and I hear that they're streamlining it, yeah, that makes me feel like, well, what's wrong with what I like? What's wrong with all these things I like? And whereas, if I'm on the outside of where I've never played a game and maybe there's been, I've heard people complain about parts of the game, then when I hear they're streamlining it, I'll be frequently like, oh, okay, well, maybe they'll fix it. And these problems that I'd heard about that kept me from getting it will actually now be cleared up.
I should point out that's my impression of watching a playthrough, and then also like watching over someone's shoulders as they were playing it at HeavyCon.
Yeah, so it's kind of an initial impression.
Yeah, that was my initial impression of Brass Birmingham. Is that might be the streamlined Brass.
What would you think on the idea? Because I haven't played those yet, but Age of Steam, Railways of the World.
Yeah, oh, definitely. That's what Railways of the World is. It's like a streamlined Age of Steam. More
Which
so
Steam
than
is
Steam
in-
is. More so
yeah,
than
so-
Steam is.
Right, and so like
Was
out
it
of
Railways of the
those,
World first, though, or was that? Am I wrong?
Age of Steam was the very first one.
Okay.
yeah, I don't remember what the order was after that, but yeah, and see that's the thing. Like I love Age of Steam. That's a beautifully fun game that has some interesting edges to it, a little bit of knees and elbows throwing, and Steam and Railways of the World are just kind of lacking of that. Now those games are vastly more appealing to the general public. Don't get me wrong, but for me, they don't hold an appeal. Like if someone was basically like, let's play Steam, I would probably play it, but I'd be sitting there the whole time going, God, I had Age of Steam in my bag, man. We should just be playing that. What are we doing here?
I agree with you on everything, Andy, but I do agree with you that like Age of Steam just has that tension that I'm always looking for. And yeah, Steam to me, after my first couple of plays was just, it wasn't pulling me back in like, I didn't feel satisfaction in Steam like I feel satisfaction when I play Age of Steam.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know, streamline to me is just come to mean something different to me. It's more of a negative thing than it used to be. Now, another one though it's starting to be used a lot, I guess, especially in the heavy game world is the game is opaque. Now, to me, that is a massive turn on. Like when you tell me game's opaque and hard to figure out what you need to do, I want to play that game even more. That's the kind of thing I like. I mean, that's what caused me to persevere against Mage Knight when I was jumping from Settlers of Catan to Mage Knight. I'm like, there's something crazy here, and I want to figure it out. So if you tell me a game's opaque and hard to work out, like that to me is a turn on. I really want to play that game now.
I'd almost say I would compare it to like my dad when eating shellfish and me when eating shellfish. Like my dad is one of those guys that I have no idea why, but he's the hunter-gatherer in him is extremely strong in that he loves buying like pistachios that have not been shelled, and then you shell them yourself. He loves buying crab legs because you have to work to get at the meat. And when you finally do get to that, tiny like little 2-calorie like sliver of meat inside the thin crab leg, my dad is just so pleased with the fact that it's the fruit of his labor, I think. Whereas for me, I would say that...
Joe, hold on here. I know why your dad actually eats most of the crab legs. It's because he's very shellfish.
I thought that was Andy's job to provide the dad humor in here.
Trent's a dad too. He can get away with it.
All right, well, Dad just loves those things, man. He totally loves them. He loves games where he loves food where you've got to work to get at it. And I agree to a certain extent. Like, I like it when I have to do a little bit of work to get to the core of a game. I don't like it when everything is just so present. However, similar to Adam, like what can kind of make me struggle with the game is if it's too opaque. Like, and I've played it 5 times and still just don't feel why, like what's going on in this game. then I can be a little bit like, especially if you don't get to revisit it enough, it can be a little bit tough to even crack that nut at all. And it makes you wonder if down here in Southeast Iowa, we have these rocks called geodes, where you crack them open, and inside there's like these crystals, and it's really shiny and it's really cool. But on the outside, a geode looks like a regular rock. Well, sometimes you'll sit there and chisel away and figure out that whatever you're trying to crack is just a rock and not a geode. And I think there's sometimes when it can feel like that, especially when a game involves so much just stabbing and the ability to undercut each other, that it almost undermines you from even seeing what mechanisms are there. So I think that it can be, I don't know, I can kind of see both sides of that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because it really depends what you like out of your games. Opaque games take a lot of plays to figure out. You really have to sit there and burn your brain on them. It's usually not obvious what's going to happen. And the other thing with a lot of opaque games also is they have usually a pretty big butterfly effect. You're going to make some decision that like 5 to 10 turns from now is going to mean something really big. But until you've really cracked the nut of the game, you don't know how to figure that out. You don't know, what did I need to do in turn one? What little step did I miss that has led me to this situation? Mm-hmm. Which is one of the reasons I think I've loved 18xx is for the last so often I've been able to look at a game and go, okay, that's where I lost the game. That decision right there, that was right then. That's what took me out.
Like when you choose to take 3 privates in 1846 and you're left with $150 to buy stock.
Yep, that was where it took you out of the game. But yeah, so I don't know. I see opaque is something that turns me on. Let's see.
I got another one here to jump up with. Go for it. I think for me, and this is really going to step on TC's toes, I think. And potentially, I don't know who all is going to be hurt by this one, but when a game advertises itself on having rules to cover, and it's kind of in quotations, everything, and it might make a huge list, like there are rules for, and I don't know, when I'm thinking of this, a lot of times war games will advertise themselves based on the fact that they have rules to simulate everything. And to me, like a lot of times that means this game is going to be more about the fact that you're witnessing history unfold on a board in front of you, more so than you're making decisions that really shape that history and make you invest, at least make me invest in the specific game. So when a game advertises that it has rules for everything, I'm usually like, holy crap, that's just going to be exhausting, and ultimately will I end up feeling like it was fun. So like it was worth my time.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I can understand what you're going with there, like the complexity thing. Like, is it complex or is it deep or is it both? Yeah, I see Adam put simulation. He said no way for him, which interestingly enough is actually fine for me. I mean, that's the Phil Eklund Science Line games that I play are mostly simulation. And so, yeah, some people are okay with that. Some people are not. Yeah, I don't know.
It depends another on your one for you, I think.
Right. I mean, then it actually does matter. And I think those kind of games for me is where theme does really matter. Because if I played a simulation game about, oh God, I don't know. I like to know everything, so it's hard to figure out.
Trading in the Mediterranean.
I was about to say, yeah, Mediterranean. If I just said once, I was like, if it was just a simulation game about dressmaking, I'm like, no, I'd actually want to play that.
Dressmaking or Are you at all interested in the Cold War though, Andy? That's what I'm curious about. Have you ever played Twilight Struggle? You have any interest in the Cold War?
I played the app a few times. Yeah, I'm interested in that. And that's the thing I have found is I would have said no to that years ago. But I'm really starting to find historical board games to be really interesting. It's a way to kind of get at the history in a meaningful way rather than just memorizing dates and battles like I always had to in history class. So yeah, I am getting kind of interested in that kind of thing.
It seems like it's been growing, though. It seems like you kind of started with themes that you were more interested in, that were more just closer to your background, and then are starting to branch into more things as you develop these, like, the ability to sort of read between the lines of the game rules to see how that simulates history. And for me, that's just not the case. I'm with Adam on this one. In our comments, he's saying, like, this, just the simulation aspect just does not do it for me. So it just, for me, I tend to be like, if it says something about how much it simulates, as I said in my description here, the fact that it has rules for everything, I'm like, all right, guys.
High Frontier. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely High Frontier. I think that's a great example.
A game that's one that I'm currently beating my head against trying to figure out. By God, I will succeed at some point. But no, I get it. Yeah, simulation could be a turnoff for people. Here's one that's almost always a guaranteed turnoff for me. This game, somebody will be a traitor.
Oh.
What do you mean? Every time I play a game with you or Nate, someone's a traitor.
Yeah. But that naturally happens.
It's like 6-player 1830, right? 6-7 player 1830.
Exactly.
Somebody's a traitor.
Yeah, I guarantee you, in 6-player 1830, someone's a traitor.
But I'm referring more to that hidden traitor mechanic, and there's really only one reason it's a turnoff for me. It's not even that I hate that mechanic. It's that I suck at lying.
Oh man, Andy's not lying about that. He's actually being honest about that.
If I get the traitor, it's just, I'm like, this is game over already. I'm going to be found out quickly. Yeah, so traitor mechanics are kind of a turnoff for me, just because, it's just, I'm not good at hiding my emotions and what's on my face. So that kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Yeah. When a game has like the ability for that to swing around, I think, like, to a certain extent, if a game just says semi-cooperative, I tend to be like, this is, I tend to be the same feeling that Andy gets with being a traitor. If a game is semi-cooperative, I can be very turned off by that. That's a trigger phrase. It's kind of like, I'm going to wait until somebody tells me specifically, like, hey, this game is really cool and here's why. And they're going to have to sell it to me hard after that. So,
yeah. Well, the other thing too, and I think semi-cooperative is kind of a trigger phrase for a lot of people, because so many games that bill themselves as semi-cooperative, it means that the game is probably fairly unstable. And not saying unstable is a bad thing. I'm just saying the game mechanics and everything are unstable, which means if one person is not playing in the sense of it being semi-cooperative, the game just breaks down very quickly.
Yeah.
So, like, if you were playing Dead of Winter and you had the traitor and he was just being obvious about being a traitor, or Archipelago, like, one of the things I was trying to figure out in that game was, is there a strategy where the traitor just basically is like, I'm not even going to pretend to hide I'm a traitor. I'm just going to do everything I can to wreck this island right off the get-go. I used to play Shadows over Camelot with my family a little bit when my daughter would still play some longer games. And one of the things that I really found out about that is if you're in a 3-player game and you're the traitor, your best odds of winning that game are getting revealed as the traitor as soon as possible. Because then the powers you get, like, just 2 people in a game, they can't keep up with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I found in there, for example, that your best way of winning as the traitor in the lower player count in that game is to not play in the spirit of being a traitor, just be blatantly obvious about it.
Oh yeah, totally. I think, Andy, it's just crazy to hear you talk about Shadows over Camelot at all. Like, that just blows my...
I had to work up.
It's like, this is totally past tense, by the way. Anybody knows Andy is not, yeah.
No, there's still one way I would play that game too. And
family.
It's family and friends, because My wife loves King Arthur stuff. And so that's like the one theme that'll pull her into a slightly more complex game out of sort of just normal. I'm really curious if I can somehow use Pendragon to make her play a coin game. I'm betting no, but I might try to sneak it in there.
Yeah. Interesting question here. Trent, I've heard people say that Dead of Winter streamlines BSG, Battlestar Galactica.
I don't think so. I don't agree with that. I think that I think it's much easier. I feel like Dead of Winter is almost like playing a role-playing game, whereas BSG is actually like a board game where you make a lot of strategic choice. I think if you play like Dead of Winter most of the time is a game where you're really trying to pound out every edge you can, the trader will almost always win. I think the game is set up like that. I don't know how if you're really pushing it and trying to get every advantage you can, you almost can't lose as a trader. And so I think whether that's a game balance thing or not, I think that the Dead of Winter mechanics make the game feel more thematic, but I think BSG is a better game.
Gotcha. But they're just two different breeds.
Yes.
All right. Well, any final things here, guys? Any final trigger phrases that make you feel that inspire a certain reaction? Strong reaction? How about cats?
Cats.
Sherlock Holmes and the furriarity.
No. No, I got one. Asmodee.
Oh.
I have not bought a game from Asmodee for over a year.
There's so many. That's like Fantasy Flight now. That's everything, man. Everything.
Yeah. And you don't see those games being bought. For me, anyway.
The back of the box starts off talking about its miniatures first. I'm out.
Yeah. Oh, what was Oh, I did have one. Oh, God, I can't remember it now. Whatever. Yeah.
I have a hard time with spin-offs. Like if it says card dice version of something, I have a really hard time.
You'll be passing on Founders of Gloomhaven then.
Founders of Gloomhaven isn't exactly a card or dice spin-off. It's more like a Euro. It's a totally separate game.
It's Gloomhaven, the Euro game.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think it's worker placement, so it's definitely going to be different. I don't think it's competitive worker placement, so I think it's mainly just the universe that's the same. So what do you guys think about that when you get multiple games that are set in the same universe or the same,
Yeah, I mean it's usually the artwork that's changing. I don't know.
What about PAX? Well, I mean, think about it. PAX Porfiriana, PAX Palmyra, PAX Renaissance. Is every PAX game now an insta-buy for you, Andy?
Well, that's Phil Eklund in general, but I don't know. Like, yeah, I would probably buy most of the PAX games, but in a line. So yeah, I guess it designer names and systems can be a turn off or turn on you. I mean, there's people I've met at board game conventions and stuff that I'm like, oh, it's a new Phil Eklund game, and like they're practically like hissing at you and putting their fingers in a cross shape, trying to ward off your evil spirits. And so there is that. Oh yeah, that's what I remember. There's one thing that's going to turn me on to a game. Out of print.
Yes, it's finally come out. So true. It's like this game is impossible to find. I love it. I love thinking about it. I kind of wonder, so people who play miniatures games, I think a lot of the enjoyment comes from the fact that you just get so much time to spend preparing for the game. And this is, more for people who are either creative or, like good with their hands. People who like doing like an art sort of project. It's not gonna make you any better at the game itself, but it's something that you can sort of prepare. And I wonder, Andy, to what degree, like if you've actually produced an entire print and play, like how much more likely you are to just like that game in general, even if it ends up being something that's not up your taste profile. If you have to print and play it, or if you have to really go out of your way to seek it down, like is that like sort of Grail, the fact that it's a Grail game going to make you look more positively on it? I know that you were just there was probably some sarcasm in that, but I'm just jumping on you here.
Yeah, no, I don't. If I'm going to really seek out a game, or I'm going to print and play it, odds are I know enough about it going into it to at least have an idea that this is something I'm going to like. I don't know. I don't know of any games I've worked super hard to find that I was just like, this is atrocious. I haven't had that experience yet. So yeah, if I'm Prent and playing it, there's usually a reason for it, because that's going to take the kind of things I print and play are going to take hours. And so it's usually something I've read rule books, read what other people think, I've looked at extensively, watched videos. So if I'm working to print and play it or going to work that hard to acquire it, there's good odds that I know enough about this to really think one way or the other. And that's usually that this is a game I'm going to like, because otherwise, why would I spend all of that time to do it? I'm not like an Uber collector. So even though, like I say, I love Phil Eklund games, the only one I've ever sought out that was, no, I guess there was two. There was two I've sought out that were out of print.
Bios Megafauna.
Bios Megafauna, which that is just totally up my educational area. So that was less about the game, more about the theme. Same with the other Sierra Madre game I did, which was Erosion, which is a card game about erosion, which I don't know. The game could be crap, honestly. I haven't played it yet. How many games are there about erosion?
I think earlier I kind of almost changed gears, and because I was talking about games set in the same universe. And I think a better example of that is like when you've got like Manhattan Project, Energy Empire, and a lot of times they'll make games that replace the other one. And that can be a little bit frustrating, as Adam says in our comments here. It really sucks when you have the first version and then a new version comes out and it just, like makes the game less offensive, and it kind of vanillas it out. And I think that can definitely, for people who enjoy the original, can feel frustrating. When I spoke earlier, though, I compared sort of PAX Pioneer, PAX Renaissance being set in quote-unquote the same universe, but really it's more of the same game system. So I think, Andy, I would say that it seems like you are a big fan of when you can get used to a game system, that new additions, new things that you can play within that same frame of mind are ones that you might enjoy more than, say, learning a whole new game.
Yeah.
I mentioned that with 18XX before.
Yeah, I like to have things that tweak already existing ideas to see where other people will go with it. I think that's one of the reasons I like Tramways a lot too, is because it's not that it's that similar to Age of Steam, but if you have Age of Steam experience, Tramways is going to click pretty fast. And I think that's just my love of train games in general. It's just that if somebody says this is a train game, you can already make some pretty good assumptions of what it's going to involve. It's probably going to involve, route building, maybe pick up and deliver, money making, something like that. So you already kind of know what to expect out of it. So those things definitely kind of play a role. But yeah, I think I do tend to like systems quite a bit.
I like them as well, Andy, but I am especially a big fan when a game system in the box that it comes in just comes with an absolute ton of like different variations on its own system. When you've got, different scoring that makes you feel like you're really kind of playing within the same game system, but changing what you do to achieve victory. So yeah. I like when a game makes you sort out, what you need to prioritize, these things that you all know, and know how to use, but it just, really works within, it makes me challenge, what I've done before and how I'm going to tweak that in this new setup, in this new, way things are out. So,
yeah, I have two other trigger things we could talk about, because this might be interesting. Then maybe we can wrap it up. The phrases living card game or collectible card game, or really collectible anything.
I hate hearing you say living card game and collectible card game together, because collectible anything, totally with you, man. That's
a turn off for me instantaneously.
Absolutely.
And I think
sorry.
I think what Andy's saying there is he doesn't like games where you have to prepare in advance. I think Andy in general doesn't like games that involve off-board preparation before you come to the table.
That's possible.
Period. Just, I mean, can you name one that you like?
Well, he seems to really always be reading up and thinking about his games.
Strategies and think about them. I think the problem for me with living card games and collectible card games is not so much that it's a game issue, but it's what you have to do in that game, in the sense that I don't want to get in a system that's going to give me a situation where I'm feeling obligated to devote X amount of my board game dollars to it, like every month. And so, and then when I start not getting some of the things that go to it, it just becomes more work and effort that I'm willing to put into it. So I just avoid it now.
Like, you don't want to feel pressure to have to get things. Like, you want it to be more
the adventure.
And I think that kind of almost goes along with Kickstarter exclusives as well. Like, I think you hate Kickstarter exclusives
there too.
Yeah, because you feel like there's this pressure. You know, they're using a very high pressure sales tactic.
Mm-hmm. And for the most part too, which is kind of a trigger phrase some of the time, it definitely puts me off initially, is if there's deck building or deck construction.
But you got Time of Crisis.
I know it was, when I read that game, that was an instantaneous turnoff, and I almost didn't really look at it after that until some people I respect and designers I respect were going, "This game's brilliant. This is how deck building should be done at a game." And I'm like, okay,
right,
then
I'll try. Yeah. Let's you get over that.
I respect their opinion. So
it's funny because you hate deck building. We had a guest designer who hated rondels. I feel like everybody hates some mechanism, and it's like it's so arbitrarily chosen. I'm sure there's ones out there that are just mechanisms I hate as well. I guess dice rolling.
Yeah, no, I was going to say that for you, but maybe to finish up here, and we can move on to our reviews. I'll kind of go over my results of the forums I posted this on, if you guys want.
Go for it, dude.
On our forum, we got a few responses, but I threw this out on the Heavy Cardboard forum because I'm like, if there's anywhere that you would think you would get somewhat uniform responses, it would be at Heavy Cardboard's forums. And when I posted this there, I think I still occasionally get replies to it. I think it's up to like 30 or 40 replies now. And at one point at about reply 25, this guy put on, he's like, "I did not expect this to happen. If you go back and you add up everything people put down as a turnoff, and we say, okay, we have to buy a game that nobody would be offended by," we literally had stopped
nothing.
It was nothing. I hate deck building. I hate area control. I don't like.
Yeah.
There was no unanimous agreement. And you would think out of the gaming community, a heavy game forum would be a little more homogenized. It really wasn't.
Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, there's things that turn us off, and each person has their own set of preferences, and I think a lot of that probably has to do with experience. But in the end, you're gonna have to decide what it is that those phrases that you have good, positive vibes from, and try to seek those out. And I challenge you. If you really think that negatively about a game, I challenge you to give it a shot. So, yeah, my little brother just jumped on here just so he could poop into our conversation and say, "Joe hates dice." Thanks, Will. Good to see you.
Yeah, Joe hates roll for success.
Yeah, that's exactly right, man. Will, that's it. That's it, Will. Next time we play, I've got a list of games, man. I got a list of games with dice in them. All right.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and let's get to hyping up some games. Let's get some excitement here. Now that we've talked about things that we really don't like, let's talk about some things that we really do like. And I'd like to hear first from Trent with I'm interested to hear what you have to say here, Trent. What about this conflict makes it so Sidereal?
Well, it's a game that I think it's. I want to mention that this touches back very well on a topic we talked about earlier, because this game is from 4 to 9 players.
Ooh.
So it covers that wide range of players that we were kind of joking about earlier. This game is a 2 to 3 hour game. It's, I guess, a negotiation and economic game. It's mostly it seems like you're mostly doing a lot of trading and a lot of developing of your own economy and a little bit of a tech tree. But the thing that has me interested in this, and remember it's a 49 player game, is there are 9 different civilizations in this game. It's like an outer space trading game. And all 9 of them basically are completely asymmetric. They all work differently. So like I've heard nothing but good reviews of this. A lot of people say it's very balanced. It has been in testing and been floated around and getting refined for years. And apparently it's coming out somewhere between now and Gen Con. And I'm very, very, very interested in playing this. So like just checks a bunch of boxes for me. Economic game, negotiation game, 2 to 3 hours, variable player powers. You're like checking my list.
But it has that 4 to 9 players. Here's what I kind of wonder, though, is if maybe it isn't kind of like one of those like Twilight Imperium where you really need to have like 6, 7 players, right, to make it really fun.
I don't know. That's what I'm looking forward to finding out. The rulebook is out, so I have read it, and it's not really. It's one of those where I feel like I need to be having this on the table for it to really click.
Yeah.
But I read the rulebook to it, and it seems like something I'm intrigued to play.
I think this one too, if I remember, a couple different Origins recaps I read about, and I think a lot of people kept going up to Heavy Cardboard and telling them they desperately needed to check that game out. I think that's the game where they said they had loads of people coming by. You need to go play this game. You need to check this game. So my impression is it's got some meat on its bones from what everyone's saying.
Well, it's a 2 to 3 hour long economic game, so that's probably an indication there's something going on. The rulebook is well. Here's the deal with the rulebook. The rulebook is honestly fairly short, and a lot of the game goes on to the fact that each of the civilizations has like a card that has in front of them that describes the unique mechanics for each faction. And you can't really get those out of the rulebook they have posted online. You can understand the basic overview frame of the game, but you can't understand how the different factions are different, really. And I think that's the piece that I'm missing. Like I mentioned a couple times in the rulebook, a specific race is an exception to this, but then it doesn't really say how. It just refers you to that player board. And I got to see how this one works. This is on my list of like my number one. I'm going to try this at Gen Con game.
Nice. How heavy do you think it looks?
The components look fine. It doesn't look. If the ones they show in the rulebook were completely fine.
Yeah, like it's not like I think that another good phrase here. It sounds like it's a pretty short rulebook, right?
Yeah, it's like 6 pages.
But very like it's kind of almost what's that like gameplay? Evolutionary gameplay or sort of
very much so.
Emergent gameplay based on the player powers that are there and how people are using them.
Yeah, at the end they give like a 1-paragraph overview of the 9 factions, but it's not enough to tell you how they mechanically work. And it just says like refer to their player sheets, and those aren't available yet. So I'm very intrigued by this. I'm looking forward to trying it. So if all that stuff, variable player powers, economic, fairly heavy, lots of trading and negotiation sounds interesting to you, I'd look at this as Sidereal Confluence, Sidereal, Sidereal.
It's Sidereal.
Yes.
Is it on Board Game Geek?
Yes.
Oh, that's it. Sidereal Confluence. Okay, yes. Gotcha. All right. Okay. I see it. Yeah. Cool. Confluence, not conflict.
Yep, confluence.
My bad.
It had a weird name. I remember that.
Yeah, it's tough to figure it out. I had a hard time locating on Board Game Geek. Anyway, no, that sounds really interesting to me as well. And let's go ahead and hear from Andy. Tell us about a game that we are really appreciative to have.
Yeah, so the game I'm hyping is Lignum. So this is Capstone Games. I think, it's their newest reprint. And so people are starting to get their copies now. Clay was nice enough. I asked him if he would send The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly review copy so we could take a look at it. And so he accommodated us there, and he sent a review copy over. It's been getting a lot of plays in our group. I've done it now twice. I think, Joe, you've had it to the table a few times now.
I've had it to the
Played it
table
3
three.
times.
Yeah, 3 times.
Yeah.
So-
And so anyway, yeah, I want to play it more because this is planning the game. And if I'm going to play a Euro game, this is the kind of thing I like. I don't like the point salad Euros as much. I like the Euros where I have to look and think, okay, I need to do this and I need to do this and I need to do this now because in 2 rounds I'm going to need to do that. A good way to think about it, for me, the game that used to signify this the most or to demonstrate this the most was Terra Mystica. So in Terra Mystica, I had to look at the goals coming up. Okay, I need to do this and this and this now to prepare for this later. And Lignum does that so much better than Terra Mystica ever did. Not that I want to get rid of Terra Mystica. I still like it quite a bit. But Lignum takes that planning part of Terra Mystica and then makes it the game.
Yeah, it's just the planning aspect. It's almost like, I'd say Agricola kind of has that same sort of like, you've got to make a few turns in advance. It's very, very tight. You have to be ready for certain benchmarks. Otherwise, you're going to end up really getting hurt. And I would say, though, that like by making everything linear, where imagine a Terra Mystica board, if you had to go in one direction and once you went to a certain spot, you could no longer go to anything behind it. I mean, it just, to me, it can, in a lot of ways, ramp up tension.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing is, for a Euro, it has that economic game feel. That's the scoring mechanism. Points is money and money is points, but you got to spend your money to make money. So how are you going to maximize your profit while minimizing your cost? So that economic underpinning to the game is also something that I'm finding very, very fascinating. So like I said, I don't want to go into review yet. My goal is to maybe do a podcast review of this next week and then maybe kick out a video review in a couple more weeks. But I'm just really enjoying it. Like I said, this was largely the only quote-unquote Euro game I was looking at this year, and so far it is not disappointing. I am having a really good time with it, and I just want to play it more.
Very cool. All right, I will now round it out here with a hype of Edge of Darkness, which many gamers will be familiar with. Mystic Vale, a card crafting game that many lauded as having a really interesting system that unfortunately was not quite rewarded within the actual game of Mystic Vale. And I personally felt like Mystic Vale was one of the biggest disappointments to me because I was so interested in the system, but the mechanisms they chose to rely on within that card crafting system were very, very basic, like just set collection. And yeah, it was just really simple. I was not very impressed with it. And then the expansions just frustrated me by feeling like they should have been included with the base game. However, Mystic Vale was kind of a game that the publisher decided to distill from a larger game called Edge of Darkness. And Edge of Darkness has quite a few other things going on where you're actually like having to defend yourself from like these invaders. And there's several different boards and lots of things that you're managing. And the card crafting is only one aspect of the larger game in Edge of Darkness. And I'm hoping that it'll be doing more of what I'm looking for from a cool system like the card crafting system in Mystic Vale. And I also did want to mention, I am super pumped. We've already talked about Time of Crisis, but I've got Time of Crisis coming in, and I've not been as excited for a game that, like a simulation war game. I'm really starting to feel like interested by the fact that designers are pushing themselves to do more than just simulate. They're really looking for like interesting systems to develop their games in, and that's really like that's what I'm seeing in Time of Crisis. And yeah, I'm really pumped. There's been a lot of positive vibes out there from TC Tattered Board, and yeah, it is.
Yeah, I basically
really
ordered it because Cole Worley, who I like as a designer, basically said this game was brilliant. And I read the rule book, and this is, I think for me, it's going to be the kind of deck building that I really appreciate in a game, where the deck building is in service of the game in a way. It's not just the game.
Yeah. It's, and that's.
Huh?
You ready to bring it tomorrow?
Yeah, I will. Someone will. I don't know.
you
have it, Andy? Okay.
Well, he might have it. He doesn't know.
If the FedEx delivery statement I got is correct, it's sitting in my garage right now.
Okay, cool.
I'll text you if you need to bring it.
Okay, I got it, and it's punched and sleeved, and
All right, man. I'll try to. Yeah, we'll try to read up on that. We might even get it played tomorrow because yeah, we got a big day, game day coming up. Probably be some Lignum, probably be some Time of Crisis, maybe some of these other ones that we've been talking about throughout this discussion. And we're going to go ahead and leave it at that with this has been this week's episode of The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly. I am your host, Joe Sallin. I've been joined by
Andrew Dennison.
Trent Ham.
Hope you guys have a great week of gaming. Thank you so much to those of you that have joined us on the chat here. It's been great seeing Adam, TC, Will, and I hope that we continue to field you guys, come back, ask us questions, and it's just been a really fun little discussion here. Thanks once again to our sponsor, Game Surplus. Go find them at gamesurplus.com. Awesome, good stuff to come there. Have a great week of gaming, and catch us next week on The Good, the Bored, and the Ugly.
I mean, I've read the rule book for Time of Crisis. I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
My wife and I might play it tonight, two-player.
Yeah, I read the rules on it too. I just downloaded them and checked it out. It was really cool.
This was awesome. We had like people joining us here that we were able to comment on. This was like legit. I had an absolute blast, and I feel like it was. You guys did a really good job of integrating what you were reading there on the side and kind of jumping in and out of participating with that, but then not letting it really derail our discussions and make them go on on huge rants.
My thing is, I tend to listen more on the podcast. So
I've noticed that. Yeah, I try to prompt you sometimes, Trent, because I love hearing what you have to say. And you usually I feel kind of like you're sitting there like, like you kind of have, I don't know, almost like a feeling like I've thought that before too when I was a little boy.
I feel like I'm mostly going to be saying, "Yep."
Okay. Sure.
Yeah. So I mostly just listen.
I really like what Adam said there. He's like, I love the spread of games you guys have talked about. Like we went from super light to heavy, and we could have even got heavier. So I was telling Andy before you got here, Trent, that I sent a list of games to give away to Game Surplus because we'll be giving those away to people. And I think, Andy, that what you did here by putting out your thing and letting it go for a couple of weeks, like if we could maybe have more this is awesome. I love the fact that we had a topic that you were able to get a lot of responses from. And I think in the future what we do is we say, hey, everybody who gives a response on this gets entered in for a free game, and I'll ship it from my own personal money. Like I'm getting it. I've bought my own games. Like I bought a separate shipment of games, and I'm just like, hey, stick this game in it, and then I will personally pay to ship it. But yeah, like let's get this in participation up. And I was going to tell you, Trent, 1846 is one of the games I put on there. What else did I say? Princes of the Renaissance, the new revised edition of Agricola, because I figured, probably a lot of our listeners have the old version and wouldn't buy the new version, but getting it for free wouldn't hurt, Three Kingdoms Redux, Nippon, Hansa Teutonica, Steampunk Rally, Lignum, whenever that comes in, Isle of Skye, Patchwork for sale if you wanted small games, Days of Ire Budapest, let's see, anything else? That's pretty much it. But those were the ones I put on the list. If you guys have any games that you think that Game Surplus carries that you'd like to see, or the games that you even think that Game Surplus should carry, send me, or just send it straight to Carmen Games at gamesurplus.com and tell them like, hey, this is a game I'm super interested in. Think about getting this one in stock, and if you want, give a not a review copy, but a giveaway copy, so that we could give it away to people for participating in one of these type of forum posts. I'm really pumped with how the forum post worked out for this episode, Andy, and that type of question, man, that's just really super cool, and I want more of this. If that makes sense. Yeah.
Generally, I have some weird idea. Like I said, so most of these are like make for good topics because I don't really have an agenda. I want to see how humans' brains work.
Exactly.
So I ask questions like that.
And we get this more participation, and we end up with guys that join us on these live broadcasts, and it's cool to have people to throw in things, because then we get more things and more perspectives. And that's, to me, what the Good, one of the other things always been about is the diversity of our perspectives, and the more that we can bring in, the merrier. And obviously, we don't want to bring in tons and tons of co-hosts. The show just will drag on endlessly. But if they're participating in the comments, I think that's a good way for them to be there.
Yep. No, yeah, I still think we have one of the most diverse likings of about any podcast. So
Absolutely,
it's good
dude.
times.
What do you think, Trent? Any comments or just yep?
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Well, I'm pumped for tomorrow, guys. And if you think of anything else, go ahead.
I said, I tell you, I got permission from the wife to come in the early mid-afternoon.
Yay!
So I'll probably try to be there between 2 and 3.
Perfect, dude. That's fucking awesome, Andy. I am so pumped, dude. Hey, bring whatever games you guys want to play. I'm just pumped to have you. I'm sorry that that there won't be a nice gaming table. I've still just got tables that are the same as what we play on all the time at whatever it is.
Functional though.
It'll be functional and it'll work. And I'm gonna buy a shitload of frozen pizza for if anybody wants that for dinner. If you want to grab something else, then I live like within easy driving distance. It'll take you 10 minutes to go there, get food, and come back. Anyway, I'm just pumped, man. I'm happy to have you guys joining me, and Sarah too. I'm really excited to have Sarah along, and maybe it'll be Sarah's first 18xx game.
We're actually kind of hoping for that. So there you go.
Bring like 89, bring 46. I would jump into a game of 46 just to see if you guys needed it. But obviously, like, I'm not going to force myself, especially if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out, and if you'd rather me not be there, I totally dig it. Like,
I think we're going to have enough. It sounds like we've got enough people coming. We can do splits.
Sure. Well, I wouldn't feel pressured into a game like 1846. I'm actually like kind of interested to try it again. I've played, and I never disliked 46. I think it was just more like when I played that game with Garth, it was like Garth spent about 50 minutes to an hour in the midst of the game just trying to plan a terrible business move, and it was like, and that can kind of happen, but I think it was just a little bit of that. So, and I've just been listening to the 18xx podcast. Andy, for the long view, I talked to Tony Fryer about like whatever would be his favorite game to be on and to talk about 18xx with. So maybe look forward to a Longview episode with Tony Fryer, and I'm hoping that he'll do 1817 kind of because it has more financial shenanigans, right, guys?
Yeah. I don't know if he's played that one very much. I think one of his favorites is 49.
Okay, well, we could talk about 49 then. I mean, I guess I didn't.
In general.
I know that you've talked about 1817 a lot, and so what I'm thinking, though, is that in the Longview, what they've done in the past is they did one episode about 18xx right after the podcast came out, and then they've done one episode on 180E of all things, and that's it. Like, I'm thinking that they could do more episodes about the actual, the big popular ones. Like, I was like, hey, Tony, do you want to talk about 1830? Because it's like, like such a well-known one. And he's like, and it's not really one that I'm a big fan of. And I was like, I think maybe he'll talk about 89 instead. I thought maybe 89. Does he like 89?
I think so. His biggest one, I know, like I said, 49. The one I've seen him really push to get to the table is 49.
Okay. Well, and I want to have both of you guys. I want to have Andy and Trent, both of you guys, keep joining in on the Longview because that's like you guys are experts in specific games, and you guys are always good guests to have.
Yep. Nope, that would be cool.
Word.
All right. Well, I am gonna let you go because I gotta go get
2 o'clock for me. I gotta take a shower and get out to my class reunion. Anyway, thanks guys for throwing this all together, and I'm really glad it worked out. I will see you guys, I guess, maybe it'll be next Thursday evening. We'll see.
No, tomorrow.
I mean, I'm sorry. I meant for the next episode. But yeah, we'll see you guys tomorrow. And then
I can record next Thursday at about 8:30.
Okay, cool. And I'll let you guys know soon. For some reason, something at the back of my head is telling me I might have had something else going on, but I'll get back to you guys soon if that's the case. Otherwise, we'll plan on it being like Thursday evening like we normally do. Okay.
Sounds good, man.
All right, cool. Catch you guys later.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.